You won't commit to follow this court order.
By the way, he identified
Madam Secretary,
himself.
I reclaim my time. Stop filibustering. Stop filibustering.
By gang members of MS-13.
Will you give Mr. Abrego Garcia the due process that the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson has required you to give him?
Abrego Garcia is an El Salvador resident who is in his home country. If he were to come back to this country, he would be immediately removed again.
How do you know?
He has received and been treated appropriately,
so
sir, and he is not.
How can you say he's been treated appropriately if the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0? 9-0 that he hasn't been treated appropriately. Why is your opinion better and have more authority than the Supreme Court?
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem there, refusing to answer that question or say whether she would abide by a court order to, quote, facilitate the return of Kilmer Abrego Garcia. To DOJ lawyers trying to claim that the information on what steps, if any, they have taken to, again, quote, facilitate his return are now state secrets. The entire Trump administration is attempting to stonewall all judicial and legal efforts to try to bring the mistakenly deported Maryland man home to the U.S. In a hearing today, lawyers for Abrego Garcia laid out a stunning attempt by the Trump administration lawyers to essentially block all their attempts at discovery by telling the presiding judge, Judge Xinis, this, quote, we're not even allowed to pose basic questions at depositions without running into the roadblock of state secrets, and saying that despite lawyers from the Justice Department trying to claim that they have complied with the judge's order, quote, we think there are significant questions about whether the government is following its obligations. Judge Xinis slammed the Trump administration's efforts to avoid disclosing any information about steps they're taking to bring Abrego Garcia home in proceedings they have managed to drag out for nearly a month and a half, calling it, quote, an exercise in utter frustration. There is simply no detail. This is basically take my word for it. The judge at one point referenced Noem's comments that Abrego Garcia will, quote, not return to our country under the Trump administration, saying that sounds to her like an admission from the administration of an unwillingness to follow a court order. Joining me at the table is immigration attorney and former president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, Alan Orr. Also joining us, MSNBC legal analyst, former SDNY Criminal Division Deputy Chief, Christy Greenberg. Alan, take me inside the significance of what happened today.
Well, today we discovered that there probably is no evidence, because even yesterday in the Tufts case with Romesa, the judge said, I've given you all this time and I haven't seen one shred of evidence. And so what the government decided to do today was say, oh, it's a state secret, so therefore I don't have to show you anything. But the judge made it clear at the very beginning of the hearing that she was going to do everything within her power to make sure the people heard what they could hear from those documents. But the government is just kicking the can down the road, because this didn't happen to our government. Our government made choices. They could have given a court to go down to El Salvador. They could have brought him back and ran him through the process to say exactly what would happen, but they're just dragging their feet. And for the people who are not lawyers, that's fine. But for the people who are in the courtroom who are not following what the court is ordering them to do, that's a problem.
What does state secrets mean?
I have no clue. Right? I've never actually seen these documents. In an immigration forum, for someone who's being removed, if they are a threat to our society, generally it has been disclosed unless it is at the terrorist level. So in my 25 years of practice, if there is an immigrant that has had a problem, drugs or anything else, it was disclosable. And if Mr. Garcia did have something that reached that bound level, then why was he in the country for so long and had his application approved over and over again? So something does not sound right in this whole timeline of events, because if there was this big of a problem, it would have captured him between the time that he was originally granted this procedure and the time that he was removed, because he was getting fingerprints and coming in for renewals all the time.
And the Trump administration is the source for our understanding that he was mistakenly deported.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and here's the answer to this, because I think it's important to hear this from an immigration attorney. We're not telling the Trump administration you cannot deport people. There's a process for it. Go through the process and then remove people. We're not telling you you can change birthright citizenship. There's a process for it. Go through the process. If you don't want to follow the process, then you don't respect the democracy. And that's the larger problem here.
And that's where Trump received another defeat today from the Supreme Court in a 7-2 defeat. There's no other way to put it. And that's how Trump sees it. He's attacking the Supreme Court right now.
7-2. You still got two who are in the bag for Trump. But yes, I mean, It is at least comforting that 7 of the Supreme Court justices are standing for the rule of law. They see what is happening all throughout these lower courts, and Donald Trump's and his administration's just complete disdain for these judges, and they are at least taking some steps to say that is not okay. And I guess we can take some comfort in that. But I would go back to Abrego Garcia. This man, we're coming up on 2 months. Like, we're past the point of temporary restraining order where there's any kind of urgency. It's always, okay, you know, they're going to stonewall every single time. This case, the judge said, I want to get to the bottom of what happened. I want to understand what steps you've taken to bring him back and what you're going to do in the future. Very basic inquiry. She said the plaintiffs could take depositions of various people to get the answers. They took 3 depositions. The entire deposition was, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Just like when they go to court, they don't know anything either. They know what questions they're going to be asked. They know what the issues are. This is not complicated, but they are purposely not providing the information that's required. Apparently, the government identified over 1,100 documents that are responsive to requests from the plaintiffs here. They produced, I believe, 32 documents, and they kept everything else for not just state secrets, but all kinds of other privileges, attorney-client privilege, basically anything they can do to stonewall. And we've seen this playbook before. Take us back to a year ago during the Trump trial and everything that led up to that, where Donald Trump had every motion you could imagine, and he would make the motion like 3 different times, even when he'd be denied, just to make sure he couldn't get to that trial, to do anything he could to delay him actually having to seek justice. So what is so ironic to me when we talk about due process is Donald Trump got above and beyond the due process. He got due process beyond anything I've seen in a court, where he would make the same motion so many times, where he got to violate gag orders from the judge, 10 different violations and didn't get thrown in jail. All these different things where he was treated differently. And now he won't allow this person to just get a basic hearing where they put in a petition and he's not asking for a trial. He's not asking for a ton of due process. He's asking for very, very basic, process to be heard, where they admit they made a mistake and they won't fix it.
Why don't they just bring him back, show whatever evidence they have, and then deport him lawfully to get the Supreme Court and all these judges off their
They're
back?
well within their right to do that. They could have done it here. They could have done it there. They could have put the court exactly where he is. They're making a decision to drag their feet for some reason I do not understand, because as I said earlier on this network, 8 people were returned prior from this because they were women, and they don't have women under that. We're paying for the CCOT arena. He's already been moved out of that stage. It is also important to note that we didn't remove people. When we remove people from the United States, we generally don't remove them to a prison. We remove them to their home country where there is some other process. So there are human rights violations for all of those individuals who've been sitting there for all this time. And this speaks to what the Supreme Court said yesterday. Is this relief specifically for him or for that whole group? Because that group, the other members of that group don't have family members fighting for them or saying, please stand up for them. So they need to find a lawyer to go through this over and over and over again.
Yeah, I just need to get a break. But why is he sending people who've committed the civil offense of being in the country unlawfully to prisons? I'm going to answer that on the other side. And everyone sticks around. We're going to sneak in a short break. We'll all be right back on a story.